Do we have a missing Bair?
No, I have him.
Yeah.
He may have to jet on us, though.
What?
So we got a few minutes with Scott.
Oh, yeah, he may have to. I'm bringing him on right now. He may have to jet on us. What is
He'll explain.
What is he, busy? Hello, Scott.
LaMarcus Joyner is a bit more important than you. Don't take it personally, but I have a one-on-one sit-down with him that was supposed to happen hours ago and is running late. So if he comes walking outside, I'm going to press the red end call button and then go tell him how great a player he is.
Okay.
So, but we're good right now. I'm sitting here in jolly old England at a beautiful 5-star golf resort, fresh off a series of press conferences. I'm already turning in stories. It's been a busy day so far.
All right, so a couple things. Scott Bair of NBC Sports California joining us from London. So first off, LaMarcus Joyner is the perfect guy for you to bring up. As a son of 2 Florida State grads, I'm absolutely okay with you talking to Florida State's LaMarcus Joyner, who is, by the way, very awesome. That's number one. Number two, if I'm in the middle of talking or you're in the middle of talking, we always peel back the curtain here. Just go, Dave, gotta go, and then that's it, and we'll be good. Don't worry. Don't be polite.
Yeah. That goes against everything that my mama taught me, but I'll find a way to be rude just this once, just for you.
So I asked the question to Jay before you came on in the last segment. I said, I don't know what the odds would be, but I'll bet you somewhere there's a prop bet. Who will score more points this weekend, the Oakland Raiders or the Bears defense? Now, the Raiders will be favored, obviously, in that bet, I'm sure, but I don't know by how much. All signs, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, point to Khalil Mack and the Bears just absolutely chewing up that Raiders offensive line. Is there a glimmer of hope for Oakland there?
Yeah, I think if Chicago kind of makes the mistake of leaving Khalil Mack where he normally plays, which is coming off of the offensive line's right tackle, that could be a pretty legitimate showdown between Mack and high-priced offensive lineman Trent Brown, who actually played who played against Mack last year when he was a Patriot and kind of swallowed him up. So that's kind of their one redeeming shot. I will say that it is no surprise that this game is being played in London because the optics of Khalil Mack hitting Derek Carr from the blind side is not something optimum. Mack versus Colton Miller, or Colton Miller and a tight end and a chipping running back and maybe a guard that drops back might still not be enough to slow him down. I think it is a fair prop bet. Chicago's defense is just awesome, and the Raiders' offense is simply reeling with a legitimate possibility that Tyrell Williams will not be available for this game, dropping that wide receiver core from back when it was AB and Tyrell at probably an A-. Now it's an F.
Scott Bair joining us from London. Let's, in order to look forward, we must look back. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the game last weekend because that was a game in Indianapolis after the Raiders got drubbed by the Vikings that nobody expected them to win either. What the heck happened there, Scott Bair? What happened, and how did the Raiders really, I don't want to say easily, but how did they fairly easily dispatch the Colts?
Because they were able to not let the Week 3 debacle in Minnesota bleed and leak into the next week. And I thought they showed great resolve and resilience and professionalism in how they went about their business, because last year's Raiders would have folded like a house of cards, right? They would have just tumbled right over, played dead, and they would be entering this crucial game on a 3-game losing streak. Instead, they're 2-2, which is, if you were to look at this portion of the schedule way back when, you would take 2-2, no doubt about it. So I think it was a real positive step for them. And I'm not saying that they're going to beat Chicago, but I'm saying that it's possible that they could beat Chicago, and especially because they are so pissed about this Vontaze Burfict thing. They are seething. Even somebody like Derek Carr is seething, and angry Raiders are generally good Raiders. And if somehow they can find a way to squeak this one out, come home from the bye at 3-2, we are talking about vastly exceeded expectations.
NBC Sports California, Scott Bair, join us. Let's pick up on the Vontaze Burfict talk. It sounds like October 8th is the date he's going to appeal his suspension. Scott, do you see him, A, winning his appeal, and B, if he does, what do you think will be the amount of games Burfict is looking at?
They're not going to go from 12 games to 2, right? That it's going to be something harsh, but I don't know. I really think that Vontaze has a solid case here because this is an unprecedented decision for an on-field action. They are essentially banning Vontaze from playing professional football, right? If he goes the entire year and he's, 29 or 30 next year and back on the street, again, after seeing this, is any team going to want to sign him? This is a really pivotal moment. And, John Gruden he's an easy read, right? If he's trying to not say something, but he's got anger written on the Chucky raised eyebrow, right? You just can feel it coming off of him. But to have Derek Carr go so far like he did in a press conference this morning, saying that the guy's misunderstood, he's worked hard to change his reputation, and he made a mistake, but it wasn't worthy of what has happened here. He also said that Vontaze Burfict was absolutely heartbroken, leaving London to go back to the States yesterday. And again, they are really upset about this. They feel like Vontaze was done an injustice. And I think when they go through this appeal process, I think that Vontaze has a case to get it reduced. But if we're talking about 12, it might get reduced to 6 or 8, and by the time that he comes back at that point, it may be too little, too late for the Raiders.
Scott Bair joining us. Listen, there's no way we can have this conversation. My listeners would publicly wreck me if I didn't bring this up. And you're a journalist, Scott, so it's not your job to take sides, but your opinion is absolutely valued. I love it. I love the suspension. I hope he never plays again. I can't stand Vontaze Burfict. I couldn't stand him with Cincinnati. I think he's a menace to the entire league. I'm glad he's gone. If I'm not being clear, I was ecstatic when I heard the suspension come down because I don't like when people try to, regularly end other people's careers. Now, from your standpoint, somebody watching the game, from your standpoint as somebody that knows football, do you think the Raider players have a point? And do you think Vontaze Burfict has a point?
I mean, tell me how you really feel, bud.
That's me.
And that's, I think that's an absolutely fair statement and a fair argument going into it, right?
Sure.
I think the difficult part that the Raiders are having a tough time grasping is that the action in itself wasn't worthy of this type of suspension.
Exactly.
This was about, this was about reputation, and this was about past incidents. And Vontaze was not playing or operating under the assumption that he was allowed to step out of line again. And he frankly did. He put his head down when he just could have pushed the guy over. To be honest with you, taking reputation out of it, I think maybe he gets a hefty fine and a game, right? But because it's him, because he lowered his head unnecessarily, and I don't think it was a good look that as he's leaving the field after getting tossed, he's blowing kisses to the crowd, right? That's again flying in the face of it. And I dug up a quote from Vontaze right after he got signed. The local reporters had a conference call with him, and he was asked point blank, "Are you a dirty player, and do you think your reputation is deserved?" And his response was not, "I'm misunderstood. That I play a totally up and up game." He basically said, "I had 300-pound linemen coming at me, trying to take my head off. This is a physical, violent game, and I'm not out there playing patty cake." And I'm summing it up now. He basically said, "I'm going to do what I'm going to do." Right? And apparently he's going to do what he's going to do at great financial cost. And this guy is a team captain who hurt his team by being unavailable. The Raiders' defensive scheme does not operate as well or in the same fashion without Vontaze Burfict in the middle at that linebacker spot. So I think if I'm injecting some opinion here, that I think that he made a decision to lower his head and try to set a tone and inflict punishment, and that was a conscious choice, right? And I think it was a selfish act because of all the things that I've discussed, right? That he hurt his team by doing that, knowing maybe not that he was going to get suspended for the year if he stepped out of line, but even if he was suspended for one game, that still hurts his team. It hurt his team that he wasn't available in the second half of that Colts game when they were making their big comeback push, right? That hurts his team. The man's got a family, right? That relies on him getting checks, right? He just lost a ton of money, right? That is a selfish act in itself. I know you talk about playing physical and playing your way, but at what point do you say, I either ratchet it back 1% so I can keep doing this thing that I love, or I'm going to suffer consequences? Doing that in the face of everything that we've been talking about is simply unfathomable to me.
Scott Bair joining us in London. We're on LaMarcus Joyner watch. This interview could end at any moment if LaMarcus Joyner walks out of that locker room or wherever he is where Scott Bair is posted up. And I want to continue on this Burfict thing. You know, it's one thing to get on Vontaze Burfict, and I'm happy to do that. But on the other hand, this is now 2 of 3 for John Gruden and Mike Mayock. And what I mean by that is they had 3 very high-profile controversial signings or trades over the last few months. Antonio Brown, we know what happened there. Now Vontaze Burfict. And the third, which has been relatively quiet so far, is Richie Incognito. At what point do you look at John Gruden and say, listen, we can get on Vontaze Burfict all you want, but Scott, if I wake up tomorrow morning and put on a jockstrap made out of mouse traps and I get snapped at some point, do you blame the mousetrap? And I feel like Gruden's culpable in this.
That's like the best line I've ever heard in a radio interview ever. Okay, compose myself here. That was so funny. You got me. Here's the deal with all that, right? I think it's damning, and I know that everything isn't in the logical lineage that I'm about to say, right? Sure. But essentially, right, you paid Antonio Brown and Vontaze Burfict and Richie Incognito ballpark. You paid him about $18 million, or we're in line to pay him $18 million, right? Sure. Obviously, 2 of those guys aren't getting a dime. You want to know how much Khalil Mack makes? Right?
Yeah.
About that. And Khalil Mack is a frickin' Boy Scout. He shows up on time. He works his tail off. And, oh, by the way, since he became a Chicago Bear, he has 17 sacks and 10 forced fumbles. The Raiders, as an entire team, have 17 sacks and 8 forced fumbles, right? That you could have paid that guy. I don't want to hear anything ever about we couldn't afford him or it doesn't work with a high-priced quarterback and a high-priced player. And those are the types of things when I'm trying to think about these decisions logically that I simply can't grasp, right? And again, this is not a logical timeline. I'm combining a series of decisions together for my own personal gain, right? That's not how John Gruden thought about it, saying, I'm going to trade Khalil Mack and I'm going to pay these guys instead. I'm just saying that when you look at the decision-making here, there's definitely a level of accountability that has to go into it because John Gruden is trying to remake this roster. And I think he has made some good strides after last year's teardown, and I'm not against every move that he has ultimately made. But when you're making these decisions with money that you could have spent on somebody else, Mac or another free agent that ended up somewhere else, and then you're getting nothing in return, right? I think that those are major blows that are going to hurt this team and hurt the long-term ability to rebuild it at the expeditious pace that they're hoping to.
Scott, let's wrap up this Vontaze Burfict talk. Given whatever the suspension is, if he is eligible to come back this season, there is no chance that the Raiders don't put him back in a uniform, right?
They absolutely will give him a helmet at the first possible opportunity. Again, I cannot underscore enough how much this team is seething at this decision. And it's not, just guys who took the podium here, that they were absolutely flabbergasted and a little upset that the information about it possibly being a year suspension was leaked to Chris Mortensen when they never told the team that was a possibility.
Wow.
And there was some dialogue about that before this whole thing came down. So they were really pissed. And they're really pissed because, again, they're looking at this as an action, and they're judging Vontaze Burfict about how he has acted on this team for the last 5 or 6 months. And I do agree with Tyler Whitehead when he said that Burfict really tried to go out of his way on a daily basis to not be the same player that he was before. Now, I know that's fun talk, right? And then, Carmichael's going to be like, look at the tape, bro. Jack Doyle almost got his head ripped off, right? Unnecessarily, right? So you can say that flies in the face of that. Or that momentary lapse in judgment created that problem. So, yes, they would absolutely let him back in with open arms. I think they believed that he was approaching the game differently. And for this one slip-up, for this one relapse, if you want to use that term, they really feel like getting rid of him for the entire year was a gross misuse of power by the NFL.
Scott Bair with us, just wrapping up here. Scott Bair is in London ahead of this weekend's Oakland Raider-Chicago Bear game. So the Raiders kind of have a win sandwich going on right now. Broncos to open, Colts last week in Indianapolis. Loss against the Chiefs and Vikings, at least 1.5 good teams. We still don't know what the Vikings are. When we talk about, we spend enough time on the Burfict thing, but in your opinion, based on the locker room and the attitude, this is great momentum to take to London. Are they able, do you think, to push the Burfict thing aside and focus on the positives and carry that momentum into Chicago? Or again, in your opinion, do you think the Burfict deal kind of tempers it a little bit negatively?
Yeah, I think that angry, pissed off Derek Carr is the best form of Derek Carr on the field. He's just such a nice guy, patting people on the ass and stuff like that. And I think he's really pretty bothered by this, and I think that's why we saw it as a galvanizing factor in the post-AB-ness of that Monday Night Football game against Denver. I think that rallied them together, and I think there is some benefit to this happening while the Raiders are in London, because it's essentially like another training camp, right? They're staying at a hotel. They're there by themselves all the time. If Tyler Whitehead wants to sit down with Paul Gunther all night long in the hotel room watching tape, he can do that now. So I think that is giving them added and greater time together to figure out what they're going to do from a linebacking and really from a defensive schematics perspective. I always think that it's a bit hyperbolic when Paul Gunther says, without Vontaze Burfict, there are certain plays that I shouldn't call. I sort of think like, well, you shouldn't have plays that everybody can't run, right? But ultimately, they need to bridge this gap quickly and have Tyler be ready to go fully against the Bears, and being here, being isolated. We're in Watford. We're not down in the London city center, right? Like, these guys are not sightseeing. They're working here. And ultimately, I do think that will benefit them. Losing Burfict will still hurt, but they're going to be pissed. And whether they have enough talent to make the Bears pay for that is another matter.
Scott Bair looks like I'm actually kind of sad LaMarcus hasn't come out yet. I certainly hope that as soon as we hang up, he just has great timing and you get the interview you want. In the meantime, where can everybody read and hear and check out all the adventures of the one and only Scott Bair?
Yeah, NBCSportsBay.com. This interview that I'm doing with him is going on the Raiders Insider podcast. Subscribe and all that fun stuff. But yeah, I was actually kind of hoping that he'd come up behind me. I'd put him on speakerphone or something like that. And no shenanigans today, but we got through it. Miracle. I guess it's good that these guys are late.
It's pretty awesome. You could have just done the interview live, just put it on speakerphone, done your interview live, and then cut it off halfway through, and that would have been great promotion for your article coming out on NBC Sports California.
See, now that would have been, that is synergy, my friend. That is complimentary football. But unfortunately not. But hey, man, thank you guys for the time. As always, again, I can't emphasize enough, the Raiders are freaking pissed about this whole scenario, right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm not trying to be on any side. I'm just saying that they are very unhappy with how this whole thing has played out.
That's great stuff from London, from the great Scott Bair, NBC Sports.
The Drive.